From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the Jr. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, once again, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. We're back. Glad you have found us here. All right. It's Monday. I hope you had a fun weekend, Andre. I did. I had a good weekend, but we entered the weekend with the Friday news dump, as they call it, and it was one for the record books there with the report that Derek Carr has a shoulder injury that could put his season in jeopardy. On Friday, you bolted from the French Quarter Fest to come here, and we did a YouTube exclusive. I guess you can call it that. I guess we can call it YouTube exclusive emergency pod, which I know a lot of you guys were able to see. Now that we've had a few days to process it, we're just going to kind of sort through some things that, frankly, I'm just dumbfounded by. I really am. So, but before we get into that, how's your Monday?
I'm feeling good. You know, as if you're living in New Orleans, as you drive down the interstate, you see a big building with a big old sign, the new home of Fox 8. So we're getting a new studio in about a month. I got to spend some time there today, and, you know, believe me, I am excited for the move. I think I'm going to miss the brick and everything behind us, but we'll get right. Believe that.
It's going to look good. It's going to look good. So I am ready for it, and hope y'all are ready for it too. We've been talking about it for quite some time. Yeah. People outside of the TV profession ask us that if you, I guess, watch Fox 8, they want to know if we move it in, and you got that beautiful sports complex right next door, which I'm sure a lot of people will have already started to take advantage of, and I'm sure we will too when we're working right next door. All right. Andre, big picture today. I have thought about this a lot since Friday. I mean, how could you not? I mean, given what we do and given the nature of what happened and just given the mystery around it. And that's the Derek Carr, unknown, injury, shoulder, could miss the season. Finding out, you know, they started the offseason program conditioning portion of it today, that he's not going to be there. We had to go there with the big picture today because I was just kind of thinking it. So I wanted to just kind of not piece, more like just kind of create a timeline of what potentially has transpired with the Saints and their, I don't know if you call him their starting quarterback anymore, Derek Carr.
Right. You know, Friday, the big news dropping that Derek Carr all of a sudden has a shoulder injury that could put his upcoming season in jeopardy. It didn't make much sense Friday. Now, as we sit a few days removed, I am even more confused by the whole Derek Carr situation. So today, like you said, we're going to dive into that timeline and try to make sense out of a strangely timed injury, or at least as much sense as we can. So, Sean, what's the first date we're looking at on that timeline?
So I'm gonna go through this, okay, and just bear with me on this one, Andre, because like you said, none of this makes any sense, and I'll echo it. None of it makes any sense. So let's go through the timeline. The season ends. Derek Carr's, you know, we were on hold the last 5 weeks of the season, 4 weeks of the season, that he was going to come back. It never happened. His season ended January 7th, 2025. Catherine Terrell of ESPN reports, I believe I have that date right, but it was in January, that Derek Carr, and she has the quote in the story, that he will not take a pay cut. It was sort of his sort of preemptive strike. I'm not going to take a pay cut. And when that happens, A, the player is obviously aware of the circumstances, and B, he's basically saying, okay, I'm willing and I'm okay if they want to move on from it, because I understand in these types of situations they want, if a team asks a player to take a pay cut, that's usually the next step. Well, he kind of fired his shot, and who knows if they ever even got to the table when it came to a pay cut. But that's the first step. So that's in January, early January. Then we go through February 3rd through February 9th. Super Bowl week begins. The game is here. The future head coach is here. Derek Carr is not. Okay. I think everyone noticed, but not the craziest deal in the world. You can somewhat, say, hey, look, he's with his family, he's on the West Coast, whatever the case may be. Fine. February 13th, Kellen Moore is introduced as new Saints head coach. talks about a ton of topics, but everyone wanted to know the main topic, which was, what does he plan to do with Derek Carr? At that time, he gave these lukewarm responses.
Yeah, Derek's a tremendous quarterback in this league. I've had so much respect for him, the journey that he's been on. He's a starter in this league. He's a premier player in this league. He's had a great journey, obviously going from Fresno State to the Raiders and now here. Really excited to team up with him and go through this process. And so just like any player on this roster, I just got here a few days ago, and I'm excited to go through this journey with all of them. I view it as Derek Carr is a tremendous starting quarterback in this league. We're fortunate to have him, and we're excited to go through this process, as we build this roster together. Again, I'm meeting these guys for the first time the last few days. I'm really excited to meet more of them, and this will be a lot of fun.
We were kind of, okay, he kept it right down the middle. I don't know if that was a glowing endorsement, but it wasn't nothing, but it was just sort of right down the middle. None of us really had any history with Kellen Moore. We have no idea how to read those comments, but nonetheless, he said what he said. Then February 26th, later in that month, the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Now, we were not there, but the print reporters that were, Mickey Loomis spoke to them, if you recall, and I pulled up one of the quotes. He told reporters there that Derek Carr, quote, is a guy they can win with, end quote. That is the end of February 26th. Okay, then we move to March 8th. This is the actions speak louder than words date. Why? Because you can say what you want to say, but what you actually do makes all the difference in the world. And the Saints made a huge step because they restructured Derek Carr on that day. They restructured Derek Carr on March 8th, freeing up a ton of salary cap space, and ensured Carr would be here in 2025. April 1st. Kellen Moore at the NFL owners meetings. We normally go to that. We did not go this year. Again, asked about Derek Carr. He spoke about Derek Carr and adds another little bit of information when he says he expects him to be there for April 14th, the start of the offseason conditioning program. Take a listen.
Derek is obviously a really good quarterback in this league. We've again, I think, been pretty consistent as we've gone through this process. With the restructure, as far as just giving ourselves some flexibility from a roster standpoint. Derek, I'm excited to have him back with us really shortly. Obviously, April 14th will start, and I think that's the fun part. These guys go through the offseason. They have a chance to spend time with their family, invest in all that, which is the right thing to do. And once you get back April 14th, you kind of begin the process. Football's in the fold, and it'll be a great process.
All right. So you're starting to feel the momentum going. Okay, look, they had a little iffy offseason, been a little weird. He's been a little distant. There's a lot going on. But, hey, he's supposed to be here for the offseason conditioning program. That's when everybody gets together. The camaraderie starts to build. April 7th. Didn't expect to add this, okay? But I think it's important just in what has transpired. Derek Carr, did you notice this? I don't know if you saw this. Derek Carr and his brother David Carr start a YouTube channel called, I think it's called, if I got this right, the Homegrown Network. They're talking about all kind of stuff. Now, if you watch that video that they put out, I don't know how many they've done since. If Carr is injured in that video, you would never know it. I have no idea when that was shot, but I do know April 7th, I believe the timestamp was when the video was posted on YouTube. So that's April 7th. 4 days later, April 11th, the bomb goes off at 3:58 p.m. Rap Sheet reports Derek Carr's season is in jeopardy with a shoulder injury that could require surgery. Since that news break over the weekend, it was reported that the Saints knew about this and were not caught off guard. Okay, well, the coach 10 days prior said he was going to be there for the offseason conditioning program, and that this stems from an earlier injury that he had. In fact, Albert Breer in his column today suggested it was from way back in the 2023 season when he had that AC joint injury against Green Bay, which is when everything fell apart for the Saints, Derek Carr, and Dennis Allen. So when did this happen? When was it known? You just heard, as we said, Kellen Moore say they expected him to be here for the start of the offseason conditioning program April 14th. That was April 1st. Sometime between Friday and that April 1st, if it was before then, that had to have happened, because if it was before then, and I guess Kellen Moore had a nice poker face going right there, maybe he was saying one thing but actually knew something else.
It was April Fool's Day.
It was April Fool's Day.
fair.
That's a great point. Here's what I'm hoping, and we talked about this Friday. I'm hoping they didn't know this when they restructured him, or I hope that the injury happened after they restructured him. If and when this injury happened, I hope it happened after they restructured him, because if they knew before they restructured him and still did it to get the cap space and then didn't sign a veteran quarterback of the several that were available. Again, this does not have to be a starting caliber quarterback, just a veteran backup quarterback or a veteran quarterback with some starting experience. That would have been straight up negligence, straight up incompetence, and would obviously go against the narrative of what? Wanting to stay competitive, wanting to win the NFC South this year. So, as much as I don't want to do this, given how things have gone, I don't believe they knew when they restructured him. I really don't. Because if they did and did not make any move to kind of protect themselves, that makes absolutely no sense. I know they made some crazy moves in the past, but come on. That just makes no sense and really is counterproductive to anything that they were saying. So I heard someone say today that it was a draft ruse to entice other teams to trade up to take Sanders or Dart and allow another player to fall to the Saints at 9. You buy that?
Not at all.
I mean, like, that seems like an awful lot of work to hope a team trades up. I mean, you're talking about your starting quarterback with a shoulder injury that could miss the season, all to get another team to move up? Come on. No guarantee any of that happens. So,
especially when you start talking about the relations, like behind the scenes, the relationship between media and the people that media talk to, somebody on the scale of Ian Rappaport, you're not sending him fake information to push that's as big as the starting quarterback for an NFL team might miss the whole
3
next
days
season.
Before the start of the offseason conditioning program.
There's a certain trust between, they call them sources, your sources and your reporters. Those two sides don't violate that trust. That's why you don't see a lot of reporters saying who their sources are. That's why you don't see sources feeding these big-time reporters a lot of fake information. There's a certain trust that has to go on there. So, yeah, I don't buy that one.
All right. That made no sense at all. What do you? Oh, the shoulder injury's not as bad now. Oh, ha, you traded up.
Like,
Come on.
he's good.
Like, that's
miraculously
ridiculous.
healed.
So there's your 3-month time frame from January to April. As for Carr, this is like let's just keep it 100 here. Optics are horrible. The optics are terrible here. Everyone knows that returning to New Orleans was likely not Derek Carr's first choice. It likely was not. And frankly, that's something that Carr and the fan base have in common, right? Yeah. Or it looks like that way. A lot of the fans don't want him here, and Carr don't want to be here. Or at least that's what it looks like. But if that was indeed the case, where he wanted to be gone by all means necessary, why didn't he fight harder to get out? Why didn't he demand a trade? Other players did it this offseason. Yeah. Well, the receiver, demanded a trade. He got it. Metcalf.
Yes.
DK Metcalf. I mean, players do it all the time. He has to understand how this looks. Nowhere to be found all offseason. No one has heard from him. Then the Friday before offseason conditioning, it's like, oh, dang. Shoulder flared up from 2 years ago. May need surgery. It's time for him to say something, man. He's got to say something. I heard it in training. I was throwing routes, and I felt the pop. Something. I slipped and fell. Anything. Also, did he really hate it here so much? If you want to play the conspiracy game, that he's got an injury, but it's not the injury, not quite as severe as it needs to be. Was he really willing to sit out an entire season as a 34-year-old quarterback making $37.5 million a year? Again, none of this makes sense, and unfortunately, both sides, the silence is deafening and just encompasses this bizarre offseason between organization and quarterback. I know that was really long-winded, so I'm gonna give you a chance to respond, but that's really where it all lays out.
Yeah, when you said we were kind of doing the blast from the past, the week that I thought back to was that week 3, and that was actually the week both of us were in Lambeau for that.
We were.
Against the Green Bay Packers, where he had that AC joint sprain, that shoulder injury that kind of caused everything. Now, the injury itself wasn't necessarily weird, but the week after was maybe the weirdest that I've seen covering the Saints in these last few years, because one thing about the Saints under the Dennis Allen regime, your starting quarterback always talks on Wednesday. whoever, and you even were like, hey, whoever talks on Wednesday, that's typically a tip to see who will start on Sunday, because whoever they send us Wednesday, we'll start Sunday. And initially, it seemed like the shoulder was really bad and there was no chance Carr was going to play. He was going to have to miss some time. Jameis Winston was the backup at the time, and Jameis talked on Wednesday. But talking to Jameis, when you're talking to Jameis is like playing with a puppy. Like, he's so excited, he's so in there, like he's always on 10, and he's really fun to talk to. But there was something weird about Jameis that week. Talking to him that Wednesday, it just kind of seemed like there was like he knew that the chances of him actually starting on Sunday were not as high as the Saints were trying to make it out to be. And then all of a sudden, Derek Carr, who we're assuming could miss a week, maybe more, guts it out and winds up playing, that week 4 game. But that wasn't the only injury he had to that shoulder. He hurt his throwing shoulder 3 times in that 2023 season. He hurt it in week 10 against the Vikings, and he also hurt it in week 13 against the Lions. All 3 times, and those are the 3 times that season that Derek Carr had to exit mid-game because of an injury. He didn't miss a start in 23, but he did leave 3 games, all with some kind of injury to his shoulder. So if this is, re-aggravating an old injury, you've got to think that maybe that's what caused it. Why didn't Carr sit out more time back then? You're a first-year quarterback who's been with your new team for 2.5 weeks, and you've got an established veteran and Jameis Winston behind you. Maybe he didn't want to, take a step back and let Jameis get that start, because ironically the year before, Jameis got hurt early in the season. Dalton got the start while Jameis was hurt, and Jameis never got that job back. Maybe Derek Carr, didn't necessarily take the time he needed because he thought something similar would happen to him. Who knows? But, at the end of the day, you talk about whether the Saints knew or not. I almost have to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, like,
I have to.
They had to know because, or they didn't know, early on, because if they knew, this offseason doesn't make any sense at all. Like, they had free agents options out there, and whether it's a guy who can start for a few years or even a guy who can serve as a bridge. There were people out there from
several
Justin Fields to Sam Darnold. Geno Smith moved around this offseason. If you were going to hire
even
Kellen
guys like
Moore,
Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, Gardner Minshew. Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
A guy who was with Kellen Moore in Philadelphia, and those two speak very highly of one another. There were free agency options out there to bring in, even just to compete with the guys you have, and Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner, or to serve as a bridge for the next quarterback who you're going to draft. And it's like, all of these options are out there. Quarterback really didn't start heating up until recently for the Saints as a draft option. Then you talk about the restructure. You don't restructure somebody like that if you know there's a chance that they're going to miss the entire next season. So when you look at the moves that the Saints have made, it's almost malpractice if they knew and still, did everything the way that they did it. As a fan, you almost have to just trust the organization knows what they're doing in this situation. Maybe Mickey Loomis has not given you that many reasons to trust, and I understand that. But Kellen Moore has not given us reason to doubt him yet. He's coming from a Super Bowl team. He knows how good organizations run. He knows how they work. Really, all you can do is wait and see and hope that they have a plan to, move on with or without Carr.
Look, I'm going to go back through the dates, okay? And not the whole thing.
Yeah.
But assuming Kellen Moore was sharing what he felt was the truth at the time at the NFL owners meetings on April Fool's Day, April 1st.
Yeah, that's the big date right there.
Okay. And then the 11th, Friday, you get the news. Look, they didn't know. They didn't find out Friday at 3:57. We know that. So somewhere in that window it had to have happened. Some kind of flare up, some kind of something. Look, these injuries happen. I know when you're talking about a quarterback and a shoulder, there can be like a delay, sort of, re-aggravation. It just feels like, man, this just discovered. I mean, if you take everything at its every report at its word, and every sort of situation that it was all, everyone was telling the truth at the time, that it had to have happened in that window, right?
Yeah.
That 10-day window. It just puts everyone in a horrible spot. Derek Carr can't play. If he goes and has this surgery, he can't play. I don't understand how he wins out of that. Unless he just, like I said, hated it here so bad he'd rather just sit out the season. At 34 years old, there's no guarantee he's coming back to any, not just the Saints, but any NFL team. And then obviously the Saints, the whole offseason is a totally different way if you know this beforehand. But as sort of a side plot to that, kind of researching this, just going through the timeline and figuring out, how it all went, because y'all are probably like us. It's just been kind of one thing after another. So I wanted to kind of get it all on one pod. But one last little kind of layer, and it's a little in its separate column. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if this contradicts the points we're making or enhances the points we're making, or maybe it's just coincidence, or maybe if it is what they were planning the whole time, then a few people were not telling the truth at some point. In researching this timeline, I came across our March 19th podcast. Do you remember the topic?
Let's see. If I remember right, we were talking about the salary cap for the Saints, and we specifically said, they cleared a lot more salary cap than they needed to. What's going on? What's the reason behind that?
I went back and listened to a little bit of that. Are they plotting a big move? I remember at the time I felt like maybe it was Asante Samuel Jr. Were they trying to make a big trade? Mm-hmm. And we talked about Trey Hendrickson at the time, or Dallas Goedert at the time. But it's just unlike anything they've ever done, where they create cap space and don't use it. Right now they have $27 million in cap space. $27 million in cap space. Now
very unusual.
You'll have like $7 or $8 million for your draft class, as normally happens. And they restructured like 4 or 5 guys. They didn't have to. I mean, the reasonableness, to get yourself far enough down to sign a legitimate free agent class, and then having enough space to sign a draft class. I mean, they signed it. They restructured an extra 4 or 5 guys that are late in their careers. And they didn't really cut a whole lot of people. I think they only cut Jamal Williams. Yeah. So we speculated and speculated and speculated. Were they telling us something then, and we just nobody could really know? How would we know? I mean, because we didn't know anything about Derek Carr's health situation or whatever. But are they now creating, or did they create that space for a QB trade, for signing a big name veteran, which there is only one big time veteran still available?
Right.
And y'all know his name, Aaron Rodgers.
They say he wants to win. I don't know if this is a made to win in 1 year situation.
I have no idea. But now it's looking like, well, that was something they don't normally do. That was out of left field. And now they are sitting here with $27 million in cap space. They do have an injured quarterback, reportedly, that may miss the season. They have no real answer on their roster. The draft is not a slam dunk by any means. So was this the plan? And was this sort of this was back March 19th. We're talking dates. That's in the middle of all of this, which makes a lot of discussion after that. Somebody wasn't telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Exactly, because, you laid out the numbers, and we talked about all the moves that the Saints would have to make, at the start of the NFL calendar. If they cut Carr, they would have to make so many moves just to get cap compliant. And that was kind of the reason that both of us were kind of like, it makes more sense to restructure Carr, let him be that bridge for one more season, and then next year you go with your young guy, whoever that may be. But they wound up making so many moves and clearing so much space, they almost could have cut Carr. Yeah. Basically, and still been under the cap.
They made the moves that, it was always, do you cut Carr, which is another one that they knew about the injury. I don't know if you can cut a guy that's injured, but around restructure time, I mean, that would have been another option. And you make all these moves to make it work. We went through all the numbers. But they did almost the exact same amount of cuts and restructures that they would have had, and they kept Carr. So they mixed both columns up. None of this makes any sense, Andre.
Talked about
None of this makes any
Carr.
sense.
Maybe they couldn't find a trade partner because, the buzz about, maybe a potential shoulder injury was back there. So it's like we have so many questions, and the problem is we don't have enough answers. Now, obviously, the Saints are going to play coy, but in this era of player transparency where the players are talking more and more and more, I mean, the responsibility almost falls on Derek Carr's shoulders to come out and say something. I mean, this fan base is starving for some kind of information, and it's been nothing but radio silence.
Look, and I know you don't respond to everything, but I can promise you if you polled the Saints fan base right now, they would say, oh, this looks fishy. Something looks sketchy right here. So if it's a legit thing that happened, which, I mean, we have no reason to doubt that. I mean, like, who are we to question if he's faking an injury or not? I mean, if it happened, somebody's got to say something. They're just, both sides have been so tight-lipped, and it's not any old player. This is your quarterback. This is your starting quarterback, and everyone seems to be left in the dark. I think the next time anybody would talk would be right before the draft. I mean, Mickey Loomis has his pre-draft press conference normally. At some point, either the GM or head coach speaks after the draft, after each round. So that might be the next time we hear anything. Until then, it's all just sort of small leaks here and there.
Nobody, even his teammates, don't know because Cam Jordan, we just did the podcast last Wednesday where he was like,
I should have put that in there.
Give me a healthy Derek Carr for 17 weeks, and we are a quote. These are Cam words. Cam said they are a top-tier team with a healthy Derek Carr for 17
And then
games.
let's not forget the big offseason goal is we're going to stay competitive. We're going to win the NFC South. And even if you don't think that's foolish, I can tell you doesn't think it's foolish. Cam Jordan doesn't think it's foolish because it's probably his last season. Tyrann Mathieu doesn't think it's foolish. Taysom Hill doesn't think it's foolish. DeMario Davis doesn't think it's foolish. How many more years do these guys have left? So you got some warriors on your organization that now took a huge hit if this indeed is the case where Derek Carr cannot play. And no one seems to know nothing.
Right, some even took pay cuts. I mean, Cam Jordan took a pay cut. Tyrann Mathieu reworked his deal. Like, all of these guys rearranging everything to potentially go after it one more year, and then they find out they might be without a quarterback or the quarterback that they thought they would have.
Stay tuned. That's all I can say. Hopefully there's more information to come out because the draft is not a slam dunk either. So we'll get into that later on in the week. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.